Brothels in ancient Greece, often sanctioned and taxed by the state, operated openly, contributing economically, but also perpetuating a system of exploitation and class divide. The women and men who worked there, many enslaved or in debt bondage, lived lives far removed from the ideals of democracy and philosophy celebrated by contemporary and modern scholars. For some, this was a route to great wealth and fame, their names immortalized in history, while for most, it resulted in a life of servitude and degradation. A man can pick whichever one he likes: thin, fat, round, tall, withered up, young, old, middle-aged, ancient, without setting up a ladder and entering the house secretly, or getting in through a peephole beneath the roof, or being carried in sneakily in a heap of bran. Athenaeus, the learned banqueters. Prostitution was rampant in ancient Greece and catered to all levels of society. These women existed within all levels of society. Some worked with educated, wealthy men, living lives of relative luxury, while others worked with the poor, laboring classes, operating out of dirty brothels for little or no pay. To be a pimp or a brothel keeper was seen as a disreputable but relatively ordinary job, mentioned by the philosopher Theophrastus as being no different from an innkeeper or a tax collector. For many in ancient Greek society, both men and women, boys and girls, street walking was the only way to make a living. They may be emetic, citizens of one city-state, but residing in another, impoverished, lower-class women, or even widows with no family to provide for them. Many were also barbarian slaves or abandoned daughters, forced into their work by their masters and pimps. As with today, different levels of the sex trade existed, catering to all levels of society. The lowest class was the pornai, meaning buyable women. These were often slaves or abandoned daughters. These women were the personal property of their pimps, to whom they gave most of their earnings, if not all. The pornai dealt mostly with the poorer laboring classes of Greek society and charged as little as 1 obol, which was anywhere from 1/3 to as little as 1/12 of your average ancient Greek worker's daily wage, such as dock workers, builders, or artisans. The affordable price of the pornai was immortalized in the work of the poet Philemon. The women stand naked, that you not be deceived. Maybe you are not feeling well. You have some sort of pain. The door is open. 1 obol. Hop in. There's no coyness, no idle talk, but straight away as you wish, in whatever way you wish. You come out, tell her to go to hell. She is a stranger to you. Though still technically pornai, free madams, women without masters, who worked for themselves, made up a second class, one step above the enslaved or indentured pornai. These women were often pornai who had managed to buy their freedom from their master, or metics who, as non-citizens, lacked certain rights and privileges. They advertised themselves freely on the streets or paid innkeepers to work from within their taverns, which offered some degree of protection. According to the comic poet Euvolus, these women often wore extreme amounts of makeup, saying, plastered over with layers of white lead, jowls smeared with mulberry juice. Unlike the unfree pornai, their prices varied considerably. Some charged as little as 3 obol, which was still 3 times as much as the cheapest pornai, whilst more successful ones could charge a drachma, equal to 6 obol, or even a stater, 24 obol. The youngest virgin madams could charge as much as 1 mina, which was equal to 100 drachma, 600 times the price of a pornai, on account of their supposed youthful purity. Hetera, or companion, is roughly comparable to a modern-day sugar baby. These women did provide services, but this was alongside companionship at events, polite, educated conversation, and sometimes even musical or dance performances. Relations between hetera and their customers were rarely a one-night affair, and a hetera could keep one man company for weeks, months, or even years, sometimes with an extra fee to ensure exclusivity. Along with payment, they maintained a luxurious lifestyle by receiving expensive gifts from their quarters, such as clothing, jewelry, and perfume. Young men were often warned about these beautiful, intelligent women, cautioned not to fall in love and squander their fortunes on trying to please them, in some vain hope that they would one day become their wife. Many plays and poems were written about the almost mystical hetera and their seductive tactics, such as this excerpt. You spoilt him by loving him too much and letting him see it. You shouldn't make very much of him at all. Men become proud when they see that. Take my advice. and shut him out once or twice. Then you'll find him burning with passion and really mad in his turn for your love. Male streetwalking also occurred, catering to both women and men. Pornoi, adult male escorts who slept with women, did exist, but the vast majority worked with male clients. For men, young boys yet to fully mature but having reached puberty were the only acceptable partners. Older boys and young men might sometimes shave themselves to appear young, but if they were discovered to be working as escorts, they were shunned by wider society. Male youth was especially valued by the ancient Greeks, illustrated in this writing attributed to the satirist Lucian. But the very man who should make attempts on a boy of 20 seems to be unnaturally lustful, for then the limbs, being large and manly, are hard. The chins that once were soft are rough and covered with bristles, and the well-developed thighs are, as it were, sullied with hairs. A regulated service industry. Streetwalking was seen as a relatively normal part of life, and so, like any other industry, it was regulated and taxed. The first laws regarding the sale of special services came from the lawgiver Solon, who lived between 630 and 560 BC, during the Greek Archaic period. He established public brothels, run and regulated by the state, and with fixed prices. Unlike today, where government regulation of the oldest profession is usually argued for as a way to improve the lives of the women involved, for Solon, the driving belief was one of male welfare, that they should have access to a legal release for their desires, especially considering that the men of Athens did not tend to marry until the age of 30. He was praised for his reforms for centuries after his death, such as this piece from the 3rd century BC. "You invented something for the use of all men, a thing democratic and salutary. Seeing our city full of young men, seeing too that they had urges that couldn't be controlled, and that they went their erring way in a direction that they should not, you purchased and stationed women in various quarters, and got them ready, and gave everyone access to them." Another reason for tight regulation were ancient Greek views on adultery. Adultery, which included having special relations with any citizen you were not married to, whether you were yourself married or not, was considered to be a worse crime than sexual assault, and so the sentence could be serious. Some focused on public humiliation, such as shaving the man and inserting a vegetable into his anus, while others were more extreme, such as castration. In ancient Greek society, it was accepted that men with urges were physically required to release them, so the availability of streetwalkers was believed to help prevent cases of adultery and violence, thus preserving the decency of citizen women. Part of the regulation of the industry included taxation, which was levied on brothel owners, pimps, and independent streetwalkers. Taxes paid went towards maintaining public infrastructure, though during the times of Solon, they were also put towards the construction of a temple to Aphrodite Pandemos, meaning Aphrodite of all the people. Legendary hetera. Madams, specifically the hetera, have a large presence in ancient Greek writings. Some concern real hetera who rose to prominence in Greek society, while others are fictional but no less influential. Phryne was one of these famous hetera. Little about her early life is known, but it is believed she grew up poor, though she eventually rose to be one of the wealthiest women in classical Athens, with even famous plays being written about her. Her esteem was such that even in her old age, she could charge very high prices, according to Plutarch. She is most famous for the accusations of blasphemy made against her and the subsequent trial. Multiple charges were levied against her, all about religious matters, such as shameless rituals and debauched meetings. Former lovers spoke both against her and in her defense, and Hyperides, considered one of the greatest Greek orators, acted as her lawyer. Whether true or not, the story goes that she was acquitted, not by Hyperides' pleading, but by the sight of her body, as she showed her breasts to the judge, declaring that such a beautiful body could only have been sculpted by the gods, and so to kill her would be blasphemy. Neaera is another famous hetera, though with a seemingly more troubled career than Phryne. She was purchased as a young girl by Nikarete, a brothel keeper, where she was then trained as a hetera. After an unknown duration with Nikarete, when she was somewhere in her early 20s, she was purchased by 2 unmarried men for 30 mina, 12,000 obols. She remained their personal slave for 2 or 3 years until they eventually married, and allowed her to buy her freedom for 20 mina, which she raised by contacting former clients who helped her raise funds. She then became attached to a man named Phrenion, who had helped her raise most of the money required and left for Athens with him. She lived amongst high society with Phrynion, even attending the feasts of famous generals, but eventually fled to Megara due to the abuse she suffered. In Megara, she was discovered by Stephanos, who offered to care for her if she went back with him to Athens. Back in Athens, she was discovered by Phrynion, who wished to claim her back. The matter went to court, and Neaera was ordered to split her time between the two men, despite the court declaring neither man was her Kyrios, or master. Some years later, she was back in court, this time for the crime of xenias, claiming that she and her children were legal citizens of Athens. A guilty verdict could have all her property confiscated, and her sold into slavery. The verdict is unknown, but a recorded speech given by the prosecution comprises a detailed story of her entire life that has survived through the ages. The special trade of ancient Greece could in many ways be compared to that of today. For many women, they were forced into the profession, unable to leave until they paid off an often ever-growing debt. For a lucky minority, it provided an opportunity for financial independence, wealth, and luxury.